So again, welcome everybody. Welcome for coming. I know there's a few new faces here. We kind of opened this up a little bit. This is our usual. We do kind of quarterly. We do a group of landlords. We get together and kind of talk about landlord issues. The reason we started doing this was started quite a few years ago by now Captain Dickinson, who went to a couple programs that talked about if we can help landlords, especially kind of some of the smaller landlords who may only have the duplex or a 3-family, things like that. If we can help you do a better business, you get better tenants in, it's a win for you, but then it's also a win for us because if you get really good quality tenants, I don't have to come to your property. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Like I said, we do this quarterly. We have a bunch of different topics that we go over. We have people from housing court come in, attorneys, tax people. Again, I've gotten a lot of good feedback lately from our group about different people that they would like to hear speak. One of the things that someone mentioned a little while ago was talking a little bit about city ordinances. At the same time that came in, Bridget Matthews-Kane had reached out to, which is one of our city councilors. Nick just walked in, Nick Morganelli's here. With the city ordinances, we have this lighting ordinance that is a little bit of a hot button topic, I think, in Westfield. So I figured I would go over a couple of ordinances, and then the lighting ordinance has kind of been a big deal, so it is on the books. I figured we would get some information out there to give you a little bit of background on the ordinance, and then possibly some ways that we can be in compliance with it. So before I introduce Jane, I was just going to talk real quick about a couple of the other ordinances within town that we as police officers deal with quite a bit that have to do with properties. And I know the one big one that's coming up right now, or that I hope, because I'm a skier, is going to be coming up, is snow removal. I'll keep my fingers crossed, but I don't know, it's not looking real good already. Snow and ice removal. Again, Chad was a section 16-14, snow and ice removal, and there's 4 different sections, things like that. But section C talks about, first of all, it has to be within 24 hours of a snowstorm ending. Any sidewalk that crosses your property, that abuts your property, has to be cleared of snow and ice. And it can't be completely cleared. You have to sand or salt it and make it safe passage so that you can pass safely back and forth. And it does talk about that when any premise abutting on street is occupied or used by more than one tenant, it's the owner or the agent in charge of the premises that is responsible for that snow removal. So I know sometimes landlords will put it right into their lease that says, okay, you're responsible for snow removal or shoveling the sidewalk or whatnot. Maybe even give somebody a little bit of a break on their rent. You say, yeah, I'm going to knock off X number of dollars because you're responsible for the snow removal. The problem for you as the landlord is if I show up and it's a multifamily, a duplex, even just a duplex that's multifamily, and it's not shoveled, and we end up having to write a ticket, it's going to you, not to the tenant. So again, I'm not telling you don't put that in your leases. I'm just saying be aware that if it is in your lease and they are supposed to be responsible for snow removal, it still ends up falling on you. I had somebody arguing that with me one time. I actually think it was down on Sherman. But they said, well, it's in their lease. If it's less than 2 inches, they're responsible for it. I said, well, that's great. It's a good thing to put in your lease. And I think most of the time they've been doing it, but this time they didn't. So unfortunately, it's your responsibility.
Can I ask a question?
You sure can.
Does Westfield have a no noise ordinance?
We have a noise ordinance. And it's pretty in depth. I actually wasn't sure if I was going to go over that.
Is that the one with the 50 noise thing?
It is. So yeah, it looks like this where it talks about, there's 3 different sections. The one where it actually lists out the decibel levels primarily has to do with operating businesses. So if you have a machine shop, the decibel level can only be at certain levels between, and I forget exactly what the hours are, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., then 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., and then 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. again. So if you're running a business, those levels have to do with your business. If it's a private residence, it jumps down a couple sections in that noise ordinance. So that one that lists everything out is 1031. 1032 talks a little bit about construction. 1033 is what I call the reasonableness statute. So if you're at your house and you're watching TV or you have a bunch of people over on your back porch and your neighbor calls the police and says, oh, they're making way too much noise, I have to show up and decide whether it's reasonable or unreasonable. And again, our regular landlords, we talk about this quite a bit with the college students. we go around the beginning of the year and talk to the college students. We tell them, look, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the noise level may be very reasonable. If you got your friends over watching a football game, that same noise level at 1 o'clock in the morning is going to be unreasonable. So yeah, a lot of people think, oh, well, the quiet hours start at 10 o'clock. There's a little bit of truth to that when it comes to the businesses. It's less when you talk about residential. Again, we look at everything, time, day of the week, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, maybe a little different than 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. We may have a little more leniency of somebody that's having a wedding in their backyard on a Saturday that ran until 10 or 11 than we do, like I said, that college party at 2 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday.
So if there's a snowstorm and you have to dig yourself out to go to work, if you're going to be out there shoveling snow or using the machine
Yep.
to get the snow out.
Again, we show up and is it reasonable? Again, if you're out there at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, it's absolutely reasonable because you have to get yourself out to go to work. I will be honest with you, there are nights where I've gotten home at midnight and I've snowblown my driveway. I try not to make a habit out of it because I don't want to annoy my neighbors that much. But if I get home at night and there's 8 or 12 inches of snow in my driveway, I want to get it out of there before I get more than that in the morning. So, but that's kind of the noise ordinance. The other one is it's kind of a little one. Trash cans are only supposed to be out for 24 hours. So if your tenants are leaving their trash cans out for 3 days at a time, you may want to get on them about that. Vehicles on the property. That's another big one we deal with all the time. And we will usually try to go after the tenant, especially if it's owned by the tenant. We will try to go after them for having the unregistered vehicles. You can only have one vehicle on your property that's unregistered and not for more than 30 days. It has to be registered and operable. If it's not, we'll usually go after the tenant. If they're not taking care of it, we will start talking to you as well to try and get that taken care of. The other one that real quick was keeping your property clean and maintained. And again, you look at a couple of these and it does talk a lot about the standards of having your property clean and maintained. It would be great if I could go in and show this to people and say, yeah, you need to clean your property up and just have them do it. It never works like that. I shouldn't say never. It works like that sometimes. But as Nick will tell you, we worked with a couple properties that it's just been an uphill battle and I still don't even think they're there. I just drove by that property the other day and went, it's gotten worse. So again, those are some of the ordinances that are out there that you should be aware of. I don't want to take up all of Jane's time. I know she's waiting very patiently for me to finish talking. But the big one we kind of want to talk about, and I have a copy of it here if you don't have one, I can send them around. This is Westfield lighting ordinance. If you can just grab one and kind of keep them going around the room. If you're here, you're probably at least a little bit familiar with it. Jane Slade, I got together with her through Bridget. And I have I stole this right off of her website to try and give her a quick introduction. But she's with Anatomy of Light and Spec Lines. She's the founder of Anatomy of Light. And correct me, Jay, if I mess any of this up. Like I said, I stole it from your website. So, which advocates for natural darkness for all living things. She's a researcher and educator in the field of lighting on the impacts of light upon the environment, wildlife, and human health. She's also a partner at Spec Lines, a lighting manufacturer's representative agency specializing in outdoor lighting for municipalities, universities, corporations, commercial developments, and transportation agencies through an interdisciplinary approach of blending design, science, and the latest technology. And you know I stole that because there's no way I'm going to come up with that.
Did you Google it?
I absolutely Googled Jane. I absolutely did. So Jane, I'm gonna turn it over to you. If I step in front of the camera a couple of times, it's just because I'm messing with volume. But they are all yours.
No problem. And can everyone see the main first slide?
Yes.
And can you see my mouse? I'm curious. Can you see the mouse?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I'm Jane Slade. I'm coming to you from Medford, Massachusetts. I actually really did want to be there in person, but it turns out I have COVID. So I saved you all of that problems. And my cat is actually just doing. Okay, buddy. Thank you. Okay. So anyways, you got to see Ferdinand too. So light and darkness is my absolute passion. I can't wait to share all of this information with you. We really got ourselves into an environmental disaster with light pollution, but there is a way out of it. So I want to offer you affordable solutions of how to reclaim your darkness. So the underlying question from getting to know the needs of your community is, how can we provide affordable dark sky lighting that improves safety and quality of visibility, as well as reduces energy consumption and reclaims the night sky? And so the goal today is really to identify lighting design solutions that are for the greater good of all. And so we'll go through what is light pollution right here and right now, and it might be more than you expect. The consequences of too much light quality versus light quantity, current tools and solutions, as well as the future of lighting design. So with that, we'll get started with light pollution. So this is lightpollutionmap.info. I implore you to use this resource, share it with anyone who may be interested. This is Europe and Asia. You'll see that there's light all over the place. This light was not here 150 years ago. And then we go to South America and Africa, blooms of light also occurring. Australia. And then we come up on Canada and the United States. And you can see the United States is one of the worst offenders, especially the Eastern Seaboard. In fact, we are really locked in light. Right now, 8 out of 10 school children do not have access to the night sky in the United States. And so, you know, even in the Northeast, if we wanted to drive 30 minutes outside of Boston, you're still really locked in light. Whereas in the West, it's not as dense. You actually could find a true night sky much more easily. And then we come up on Boston and Massachusetts, and you can see actually pink is some of the highest amounts of light pollution, and then white is even worse. And Boston is touching that, is getting that pink white on the map. And then you go over here to Springfield, same thing. When we zoom in on Springfield and Westfield, you're starting to see that pink and white occur. And actually, light pollution really doesn't care about how many people are in your city, because Boston has 650,000. I looked this up for you guys. Springfield has 150,000 and Westfield has 40,000 people. So we're starting to see light pollution crop up, not necessarily in proportion to the amount of people there. And the problem is that it's all too easy to pollute with light. And so essentially light pollution is really all around us, and yet we hardly realize it. Moving on to our next section, we'll get into the consequences of too much light. And this is really, we are not at the tipping point of understanding. In the 1950s, doctors would say, oh, you know, it's okay to smoke a cigarette every now and then. They were not at the tipping point of understanding. Now we know that cigarettes cause cancer. Actually, it's been shown in studies that light at night is a carcinogen. So we have not reached this tipping point of understanding. In the past 8 years, the planet has never been hotter in recorded history. It's also never been brighter. And so both light and temperature are rapidly changing environmental factors that are the basis of evolution and behavioral change. Humanity is simply not paying attention to light pollution. And I will tell you, I give grassroots presentations all the time. And people come to me after being like, I understand, I get it. And it's because light is not really necessarily feeling harmful to humans, even though it is. And so night is actually half of the planetary experience. So really 50% of darkness is how most of time on Earth has been experienced. And the proliferation of undesigned, and I really want to underscore the undesigned aspect of LED lighting, has caused this unexpected environmental disaster. In 2014, Shuji Nakamura won the Nobel Prize for the blue LED. And that's because we greatly reduced the energy consumption for lighting because of that. But what's happened is we've actually added back way more light because it's so cheap to run than ever before. And now we don't really even turn lights out. So actually, because they're so cheap, we have completely created a different environmental problem. And so light pollution impacts all living things. Plants grow differently. There's studies with soy plants that were close to the road actually matured 7 weeks later and produced less fruits. It also impacts pollination. It reduces pollination. It also changes pollinator selection. So because LEDs skew the colors of flowers, pollinators end up choosing different flowers. It's an absolute atrocity for birds. We lose up to 1 billion birds each year in North America alone due to fatal flight into buildings. Also, birds use a map of the stars to migrate, and what light pollution does is it not only distracts them, but it also blinds their way. Insects, we are seeing an insect apocalypse. They're attracted to lighting fixtures and then they stop pollinating. Bats also hang out at these light fixtures and eat the pollinators instead of doing what they would normally do. Zooplankton stop navigating in the presence of light. Zooplankton are likened to the largest earthly migration on the planet because they hang out in the depths of the water. And when the message of darkness does not come, they will not vertically migrate to the top of the water. Many people have heard of the sea turtle problem. Sea turtles, the little baby sea turtles, they hatch on the beach and they go towards the street lighting versus the moon they don't recognize over the water, and then they end up dying. So this is just a smattering of the impact. In fact, this is how I entered into this subject. I have an entire presentation on this called Starving for Darkness, and there is no species that is not impacted. And the other thing is that it's not just wildlife. Humans are greatly impacted by light pollution. In fact, what we're seeing now is that it creates an increased risk of cancer. It's also increasing mood disorders in terms of having more presence of light at night, as well as increased rates of depression. So these studies have all been coming out. So it's a real impact on humans as well. We may not notice it. It may not be the first line of defense in terms of the night sky and the birds navigating to find their way on the planet, but it definitely impacts how we feel on this planet. And so in comparison to sound, and I know we were just talking about the sound ordinance, but we cultivate silence at night, but we leave the lights on. And I think that that's something that we really need to look at more closely at why we think it's okay to leave lights on, but its silence is needed. And so the other issue is that a view of the night sky has been linked to countless epiphanies. And this is a lot of the work that I do to try and incentivize darkness rather than take away light. But how do we tell our children that they may have less epiphanies in their lifetimes because we've blocked a view of the stars? And so we already possess the solution. In fact, with modern lighting design and technology, it's possible to get people home safely and to reclaim the night sky. Moving on to the next section, we'll talk about light quality versus light quantity. So the model lighting ordinance, which was a guide for how you wrote your lighting ordinance, it was written by the Illuminating Engineering Society and the International Dark Sky Association to help communities adopt a lighting ordinance to make better choices. And within this document, it cites that one lighting fixture has the ability to pollute up to 120 miles away. And this is absolutely true. If you actually look at the light pollution map of New York City, it is not until 120 miles offshore do the foot candles drop to zero. So light quality is not determined by light quantity. In fact, actually, too much light can ruin visibility due to glare. In fact, the human eye can see at really low light levels and really high light levels, but not at the same time. So it actually takes about 2 to 4 minutes to adapt to brightness, but up to an hour to adapt to darkness. So if you have a really glary light, you're actually ruining the natural eye's ability to adapt to a lower light level. And this is an example. This is from a website called Astro Backyard, showing actually how glare can really disrupt visibility and what the difference of a dark sky light can do for visibility. And spoiler alert, but a dark sky light, basically the light surface is parallel to the ground. Anytime you have a lens showing in a vertical way, that is actually going to let the light bend out and back upward. This is what you can achieve with dark sky lighting. And this is a source of inspiration for humankind. And quite frankly, I think there's nothing more beautiful than a nightly night sky. Now, this is an image from Westfield that I have received, and you can see how you're getting this condition of light going up and out, and really not necessarily getting to where you want it to be. And the daytime version of an installation like this is basically a floodlight pointed out instead of down. And while you may be getting a lot of lumens very easily out onto your project, they're not well directed and they're not necessarily improving visibility. In fact, you can see that in this other photo, actually, and the International Dark Sky Association talks about this in their literature, that this is actually creating dark spots. Bright light increases the darkness. And so you're getting dark spots where someone could be hiding or there could be tripping hazards. So more light isn't exactly advantageous to landlords wanting to keep their tenants safe. And floodlights, you know, I do a lot of writing, and I recently wrote in an article for a lighting magazine, which is, why are we naming lighting solutions after natural disasters, floods? And so floodlights truly do spill lights, and they really should be a last resort for a lighting installation. They should not be a first resort. And here we have one of the results of a lighting condition that is not being careful with where the light is being directed. And this is actually where somebody lives. This actually breaks my heart that someone has to live with light that you could read by shining into their home at night. It's a loss for that person that they don't get to experience darkness. With photometric design, this harmful and wasteful light, which is really just a consequence of the project, it wasn't the start of the project, this can easily be avoided. And this also presents another issue, which is light justice, which is that very often they have found, this is an organization run by my friend Edward Bartholomew, they've found that darkness actually occurs in some of the most privileged neighborhoods. And that we have shown light upon neighborhoods that we feel need to be watched. And so this really does present a social justice issue, that we don't let certain neighborhoods experience beneficial darkness. You can go and visit this new organization, Light Justice, and they're trying to bring better light quality to all living things. And so another reason why we're seeing that pink on the Westfield part of the light pollution map is that the streetlights are also not dark sky. And you can see that, as I said before, this lens is actually pushing light out and back up again. Had this been a flat lens parallel to the earth, you would actually see a lot less light pollution. And so finishing up this section, lighting is an art and a science, and with proper photometric design, unintended harm can absolutely be avoided. So we'll go through now current tools and solutions. This was another collaboration between the International Dark Sky Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society to come up with the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. So one is that it should be useful. It should actually be towards a goal. And then it should be targeted, We actually, one of the benefits of LED lighting is that it's very small, meaning that we can specifically target where it goes. Light should be no brighter than necessary. I have had people say to me, oh, just add another light. I don't want to worry. And that is really not the point, because it doesn't address actually quality of light and visibility. More light really doesn't necessarily mean that. And so controlled light, meaning that we should be turning lights out when we are done using them. And then also the color of light. When Shuji Nakamura invented the blue LED, we went with the bluest white light, 5000 K, because it was the most efficient. Unfortunately, that's most mirrors the blue light of the dome of the sky of day. And so it is the most triggering for wildlife. As we've come through the LED movement, we now know to keep light much warmer. And I'll show you examples in the future. So this is a kind of a graphic to show you of the best principles, but we want to shield light. And this is all written in your ordinance. And then we also want to use warmer color temperatures, reduce light levels, and then turn them off if we can. Now, the IES actually has a handbook. They joke that it's the 2 handbook because it is literally this big. For recommendations for every type of application, committees break up and study and develop lighting recommendations for horseshoe courts, horse tracks, parking lots, roadways, literally whatever you could think of, there is an application in this handbook. So it doesn't need to be guesswork what is considered the status quo of safety. The best practices is to therefore design for specific applications. You don't want a light for surgery, which is 200-foot candle, if you only need facial modeling for facial recognition, which is 1-foot candle. So there are a ton of variation in terms of the amount of light you would need per specific applications. And these are examples. You have a wooded roadway. Well, in lighting, we're now saying, you know, we have headlights on cars. Not every wooded roadway needs streetlights. And then in the middle, you have maybe a small, quaint Massachusetts town. Sometimes this ends up being decorative lighting. And then on the right, you have a city plaza that's, by the way, empty at night. So can't we find a way to turn these lights down or off later in the evening? We want to conduct photometric studies, and that is something that at Spec Lines we can truly help you with this. What does that really mean? Well, one, you can actually take a light meter and walk a site and assess what is the existing ambient light that's already falling on my site. One of the criticisms that I have with a lot of projects is that they design lighting as if there's going to be an apocalypse, and the only light that's going to end up, the only project that's going to end up living is your project that you're designing. And what happens is we end up just ratcheting up the light levels. And actually, that's one great way to save money, is if your site may already have a good amount of ambient light around it. And this is a photometric drawing to the right. So what we do is we load up the files for each of these fixtures, and then we do a point-by-point calculation assessing what are the foot candles falling on all of these areas. And then we put these into statistics and calculations, and we can tell you about the quality of light that is being designed into your project. And so here is your part of your ordinance. And so we're seeing that at property lines, we're seeing 0.1 and 0.01 and 0.5 and 0.05. I just want to tell you that in my experience, these are very reasonable. And because of the accuracy of LEDs, it is attainable. So I know that these numbers can feel really intimidating at first, but I can tell you in the lighting industry, actually, this is quite standard fare for property lines. And so we really want to make sure that we're not seeing the glare of the light sources as well. And then the heights are also very normal, 16 and 30, as well as turning lights out. This is key. If we turn lights out, there's actually no more savings in terms of energy costs, and then unnecessary triggering of humans and wildlife than when a fixture is off. And so we want to provide the right amount of light, not more, not less. And this has already been reviewed and recommended by the IES. And so what I would say is when you are designing a lighting project, ask yourself who, what, where, why, and when. And these questions can really help refine, like, is that a second floor residence? Is this event only used is this parking lot only used for events once a week or once a year? These can all help us to assess of how much light is needed and when the light is needed. Using dark sky compliant fixtures and shielding. So there are a ton of different form factors that are now available. This is a company that does decorative post stops, so historical fixtures. You'll notice there's no more glass because the glass would push the light out and up. Actually, the light center is in the hat here. And so this is also a lens that's refracted. So when you look at this fixture, you will not see different light modules. So these are all different things that have helped to attenuate the presence of light pollution. Utilizing warmer light rather than cooler light. And here's an example. You can see this is the sort of old world warmer light versus blue light. And I would argue that this blue light is triggering living things with absolutely almost no value given to humans. So I think we need to be very careful with how we select light color. And then utilizing controls to limit impact. So basically, controls offer the greatest opportunity to light for human activity and to protect wildlife. Controls can control fixtures down to a single fixture in a city. We have platforms that you can see all the lighting. You can tell what's not working. If there's a neighbor that's complaining about a light, you can address that one light. So control systems have come completely into a new generation, and they really allow us to have eyes and ears on how we're lighting our communities. And the way that I say it is that if you're not installing controls in your fixtures, it's like sort of like buying a laptop without Wi-Fi. And so smart controls can help us to reclaim a lot of the unintended light pollution that's happening. And then we want to avoid uplighting always. And so this is also from your ordinance, and this is showing once again that the light source is parallel to the ground. And so that's how we really don't want to see a lens or anything projected out at an angle, because that's really what causes light pollution. And so here are just examples. I wanted to show you that there really are very affordable companies out there. This is a dark sky wall pack, street and area light, parking lot light, and these can come in lower color temperatures all the way down to 2200 K. And then I also want to share with you that solar technology may be very helpful because there's potential cost saving that could occur. First Light Technologies is a great company. They're actually from Canada, so they're north of here, and they manufacture solar lights. So that says a lot about how far solar technology has come. And you can see that this fixture has a solar panel right on top. These can be designed to be quite decorative. And so actually the benefit, and this is a photo of one of the installations in Westfield that has a floodlight, just flooding light out sort of without direction. You can see that you actually there's great sun in this parking lot, and you would not need to trench. You could actually plant this pole like a tree and save a lot of money in terms of the trenching for wiring. And I'll show you a project we did in Topsfield, Massachusetts, that was exactly for that reason. They did not want to trench. This is another project. You can see these floodlights. This is a very common old type of floodlight that you will see around. And these are, in my opinion, very outdated at this point, because we just should not be shining light like that anymore. And so actually this is another great opportunity for solar. There's no, the thing to watch out for solar is if there's a tree canopy. That becomes an issue, but this is actually a great place because there's a lot of open space here. And so this is actually a project with First Light. You can see how they've done their parking lot here. They literally just planted these poles like a tree. I believe certain poles actually can be installed within 30 minutes per pole. So it's actually a massive savings in installation costs for that reason as well. And I thought this photo was funny because I pulled out of it, and you'll see actually that there's wasted light actually just to the left in this photo of basically a light installation that's not dark sky friendly. And you can see really the difference in the quality of light that's being delivered as well. So in short, current lighting technology can save money due to ease of installation and reduced energy costs. In fact, we've actually eaten back up a lot of our energy gains because we use so much light. So closing up on the final section of the future of lighting design, I just wanted to share this project. We did this project in Topsfield, Massachusetts. Topsfield has, I believe, the oldest fair, or one of the oldest fairs in the United States, and they bring a lot of people through to their main thoroughfare. They had just renovated their sidewalks and realized that they missed an opportunity to include beautiful, welcoming street lighting. So they came to us and we developed this solution. This right here is actually a solar tube. This is a dark sky lighting fixture. It utilizes controls so they can actually operate on a celestial clock coming on at dusk and turning off at dawn. So really, in a sense, you can have it all. And so this is admittedly a more expensive solution. However, with other solutions, if you mix and match, there are ways to keep this affordable. And I will say that Speclines does free photometric analysis. So if you want to send us your projects, we'll very, very happily help you meet a budget. This is another project that we did in Hull, Massachusetts. These fixtures and poles were once again planted like a tree. So there was no trenching for wiring needed at all. And that saves with replacing the macadam, etc. So the underlying question is, how can we provide affordable dark sky lighting that improves safety and quality of visibility, as well as reduces energy consumption and reclaims the night sky? And my answer is utilizing photometric analysis. It does not have to be guesswork. You can literally buy a fixture, take the file that comes with that fixture, upload it into software, and you will know what will happen. It's not guesswork. And so this is an example of a photometric design that we have worked with people to complete. Very large project, making sure that all recommendations were met. And so this guesswork does not have to be on your shoulders. There is absolutely help. Companies like Speclines or other companies out there that will help you develop lighting plans that meet your budget and also meet your lighting goals. So dark skies really are ahead. They're coming. And so the train has left the station. It's really time to start reclaiming darkness for our wildlife, for our communities. And that what lies ahead is actually one of the most beautiful natural wonders. The stars are just behind a thin veil of light, and each community has the power to reclaim the night sky. So with that, I will open it up to questions, and thank you so very much.
We have questions? I have a question. Okay, we have one question.
Sure.
The height of a light obviously makes a huge difference. If it's higher, the light is going a farther distance and it can be more intrusive. Is there an ideal height for, let's say, a parking lot, a sidewalk? Like, you mentioned 16 and 30 feet or something, but are there Are there other heights that are preferred for those types of situations?
Yes, so actually it's a really good point. Sometimes communities I'll see that they kind of go crazy in how they write their lighting ordinance, and like the maximum pole height is 12 feet. And actually that has a cost impact because then you really can't spread the light very easily, and then you have to buy more fixtures and more poles. So it doesn't always make it easier. If you do have, say, a 30-foot pole, which is really high, and you would probably want that in a very commercial center, that is going to spread the light. However, the optics of the LED can really help you with that. I would say there's really no carte blanche answer for you because it's all going to depend on the scenario that you're lighting for and the actual topography. So there's pros and cons to each. And depending on the situation, we may choose one based on your lighting goals, budget, and also trying to keep the light levels down and the spread down.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
One of the more dangerous lights we encounter is driving down the highway and somebody has the new LEDs on and you can't see.
Right.
Past that car, so we're being blinded. And there's so many cars up there. What can we do about car lighting that would help with this? And let us see that.
Yes. And just to repeat for the recording, that the gentleman is saying that car headlights are an issue with driver visibility, and I would wholeheartedly agree. My standard answer for that is that car designers are not lighting designers, and I think that's absolutely true. I've even found sometimes that the dash of the dashboard is too bright, so that my eyes are adapting to the brightness of the interior car. And that's presenting a dangerous situation for my eyes to see the exterior. So you're absolutely right. I believe regulation is coming. Unfortunately, it's a little outside of my domain, but it's been on my list of problems because I don't envy drivers who are having the issue of headlights because it is absolutely light pollution.
Anybody else? Good.
You talk about reclaiming costs by changing to dark sky compliant lighting. Are you comparing that to incandescent to newer lighting, or are you talking LED lighting to newer lighting? Because I would imagine the cost savings to go from an LED to a dark sky compliant, there really can't be a lot of savings in it.
Well, you are buying a new fixture, and so if you are going from LED to LED, there may not be any cost savings on that aspect of it. That's true. Incandescent, absolutely. We don't typically see incandescent outside. We'll see HID and high pressure sodium, in which case you would see energy savings. It really all depends. But the unfortunate part is that in 2009, we really started to see LEDs enter the market. And from 2009 to 2015, LEDs were installed with not a lot of understanding, and they were often in high intensity 5,000 K blue light. I was in New York City for a conference, and I heard two people in the elevator whispering behind me, and they were saying, you know, we got it wrong. We got it all wrong. And I can attest to that because my friend lives in Brooklyn and she had blue LED light shining right into her apartment windows. And so unfortunately, the fixture replacement, if you already have LED, is a cost. At the same time, LEDs are not that expensive anymore. And so I would say that to reclaim darkness, to make tenants feel happier, to create increased visibility are all values to a better light fixture that you will find reward from.
Another question.
Sure.
If I heard you correctly, stay away from the big bright lights and go to more of a yellow light because the eye adapts better. So is that a better safety? So you showed a screen where there was a darkness in there. Okay, I used to live in New York City, and I always avoid areas where there's contrast because that's where people hide.
Mm-hmm.
But from an apartment perspective, if you can dull out, if I hear you correctly, you dull out the light, you kind of scatter it nicer in the eyes, adjusts better. Am I understanding you correctly?
So with the color of light, it's not really so much about safety. That's just that essentially we start with a blue LED. It's really blue. And then they put phosphor on top. The more phosphor they put on it, the yellower the light becomes, the less efficient it became. So in the early stages, everyone was about efficiency. So we went with the bluest light, and that was the most jarring. Now it's less efficient, so you need more electricity. It's not that much more. So we want a warmer light because it's less triggering on living things. For safety, what you're looking for is what we call uniformity. And to your point, you don't want a bright spot and then a dark spot because that's where someone can hide. So for safety, you're looking to have an even layer of light across the path or route you're trying to protect.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
We recently put some criteria on parking lot lighting for trucks to park. And one of the things that we asked for is that they use motion, that the lights are on motion sensing because the trucks are only coming in a certain time and they're leaving in the morning when probably it's going to be light anyway at that time. So that they're not staying on all the time. You mentioned a clock having lights on dawn and dusk, but what about motion sensing? Is that something that is favorable in certain situations?
Absolutely. I could talk to you guys for another hour on controls alone, but motion sensing is an absolute method to turn lights out when they're not in use. So it's absolutely a wonderful technique. I'm happy to hear you're using it.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What's the realistic lifespan on a solar powered park light? How reliable are they?
Yeah. So I believe the batteries alone on some of those manufacturers are 5 years, and then you can actually replace the battery and then continue on. So it's much better than it used to be. And actually, I can get you that for specific manufacturers, but with one of those manufacturers, with First Light, there's one video where they literally take a baseball bat to those fixtures and they're indestructible. So actually, in terms of longevity, you will see a return on value for sure.
Yes.
Forgive me for the way that I'm gonna word this. It makes sense in my head, but I'm exhausted. I've been up since 4. I apologize. When it comes to changing light over to be more environmentally friendly, how do you justify the potential either increase or decrease, if there was decrease, of crime? Because in your presentation, you were mentioning that there was a road that was empty with all the lights of the road, and it was fine. Well, if my property is well lit, but yet I turn my lights off to save energy, to be more environmentally friendly, isn't that the invitation for criminals to trance around my property, do homework on my property, and also just crime in my neighborhood? Because that's what criminals do. If they're smart and don't get caught, they do their homework in terms of habits of a neighborhood, lighting, and where they can and cannot hide. So how do you justify the lighting that you do for your business and reduce crime?
Yeah, great question. And this is one of the number one lines of thought that has kind of created issues, because it's a very reasonable question that you're asking. And I am never advocating to put anyone in danger. The truth is that in studies, the correlation between light and safety is very weak. And I'll give you an example. In Chicago, which is actually known as a light polluted city, it's one of the most overly lit cities, the street lights went out in one corner and the crime actually followed the lights where the street lights remained on. So in this case, it's really considered that light is an invitation. It is a beacon. And so it's not always the case that light and that darkness equates with crime. In some cases, we've seen that vandals are just as scared as darkness as everyone else. So I would say, that each case is unique, and you know your area of the world better than I will ever know. But keeping lights on has not been shown to be a deterrent. In some cases, it can be an invitation. So I would just say, for your thinking, perhaps just consider that it's not a rope tying, criminals' hands behind their back to if there's a light on. And so I would say that perhaps there's a little more room for darkness that you could maybe experiment with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? All right, great questions. Jane, thank you so much for taking your time and rolling yourself out of bed in your in your COVID-induced condition here. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to make this work. Unless anybody has anything else, Jane, thank you so much for being here. And I'll get back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Great. If anyone wants to reach out to me with questions, my contact information is there. Thank you to Eric and Bridget for helping organize this. I really appreciate it. And I'm here as a resource to everyone in Westfield. So thank you very much.
Thank you.